Welcome to this first full council meeting for 2025. I'll just open with karakia, e te whānau o te kaunihera o te aorere, paia te mautaranga kia marama, kia whai taki kia whai mahi katoa, tu maia, tu kaha, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou e tātou katoa, tihei Māori ora. I don't believe we have any apologies. So I will now move to the public forum, and we've got 3 people registered to speak in public forum. Mark Morris on behalf of Pekahoa Residents Community Association, Joan of Santa Barbara on behalf of Nelson Tasman Climate Forum, and a presentation from Anaweka Waka, Jenna Name. So each of those is representing an organisational entity, so they have a longer period of time. So I will start with Mark Morris. So welcome, Mark, and I will give you a nod when you've got a minute left on your time if you've used it up.
Thank you, Mayor Tim and councillors. Okay, thank you. I'm representing on behalf of the Pekahoa Community Residents Association, PCRA, who are currently seeking resource consent for rock protection in front of 3 properties at Pekahoa Beach. In terms of background, the main Pekahoa Beach subdivision was approved in 1957 with a 20-metre esplanade reserve in front of the properties. The reserve has been gradually eroding since 1959, and in 2013 there were a number of extreme storm events that caused 6 to 8 metres of erosion. Basically, the esplanade reserve was lost to the sea, to the extent that some properties were at risk from significant damage from further storm events. And it was clear that permanent rock protection was the only sustainable protection for a number of properties. It was clear at the time the rock protection north of the camping ground that was constructed in 1978 was proving highly effective against the storm hazards. This rock protection had been installed under the Golden Bay County system of coastal consenting system, which involved ringing up the local county chairman and asking if it was okay to put up a rock wall on the Esplanade Reserve. And if he or she said yes, you went ahead and did it. And that was the official system. Oh, for simpler times. Here's the irony. That same rock protection is still in place with minimal maintenance and no conditions inside. In 2016, a Memorandum of Understanding MOU was signed between the TDC CEO, Lindsay McKenzie, and the PCRA, that providing PCRA sought resource consent, TDC would not unreasonably withhold approval to undertake work on council land. At the time, it was expected that the PCRA would be able to get consent in 4 years, and so a December 2020 end date was set down. Sadly, the consents were not able to be obtained in that time, but we believe the intent of that agreement should still apply. We eventually got consent for the 3 worst affected properties in December 2022, which included TDC landowners' consent. The consent involved 37 conditions of consent to ensure that the rock protection remains in place as consented in strict covenants and ongoing monitoring required by the landowners to ensure that the rock protection was maintained in perpetuity by the respective landowners and ongoing landowners, because it's registered as covenants on the title. This rock wall has now been completed. In March 2024, we applied for resource consent for further rock protection virtually identical to the last one on the next 3 properties at risk from erosion. We volunteered the same 37 conditions that had been imposed in the previous consent at the time, and at the time, council was waiting for approval policy on private structures on TDC reserves. So we waited until June 2024 when it was approved, and a revised application for TDC landowner consent was made in accordance with that June 24 policy in August 24. The main sticking point with the new policy was the liability and risk section of the new policy on page 16. We did not have any problem with the landowners accepting sole responsibility for the ongoing maintenance of the structure, which is carried through ongoing covenants and licence to occupy. But we were concerned about the requirement for a bond to allow council to remove the structure at any time. We sought clarification from council staff thinking that the bond was a maintenance performance bond issue, which is common in these situations. But we're shocked to be told, no, this has got nothing to do with maintenance, but instead allows council to remove the structure at any time. An example given being that it could become unsightly and need to be removed. We were stunned by this. We have grave concerns about this part of the policy for 3 reasons. Firstly, it contradicts the whole consent process, which is all about the structure remaining in place as a permanent structure and performing as consented. Secondly, it is unfair and unjust that landowners have to enter in and invest in a construction project knowing that council could remove the structure at any time. Thirdly, it is unjustified in the extensive requirements of the resource consent process and associated legal requirements on landowners and subsequent landowners ensure that the structure will perform as required in perpetuity. What do we want? We want the removal of the removal bond clause to be removed from the policy to allow the consent requirements and the obligations of the resource consent process to deal with any possible effects on the reserve and the environment. We have provided a report from Coastal Engineer Gary Tier from OCEL outlining likely damage and maintenance issues that may require repair or to make good the rock protection structure and the likely costs involved, not the removal. We believe this, together with all the strict requirements of the 37 volunteer consent conditions, which we have volunteered to meet the council concerns for liability and risk set out in the policy, and therefore we request that our application be presented to council for landowner approval at the next full council meeting in March. In conclusion, what we have here is a proven engineered design rock wall designed by one of New Zealand's most experienced coastal engineer, Gary Tier, with over 40 years experience in coastal engineering and extensive knowledge of the unique coastal hazard risk at Pekawa, and has tailored the design to deal with the particular hazard for the site. A location where the rock protection at Pekawa has been in place for over 50 years and proved to be resilient and sustainable without ongoing end effects. The nearby quarry at Mount Burnett provides some of the best hard rock for coastal engineering in New Zealand that can provide the right-sized 800 to 900 kg boulders required for effective coastal protection. A highly experienced local contractor, solid contractors who have had 50 years experience in accurate construction of coastal rock protection and are always available nearby for any ongoing maintenance that may be required. We believe that these above matters should enable council to confidently provide landowner written consent to this proposal. Let's get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And that's within your time. So thank you for coming and making your presentation today, and we'll consider it in due course. So, thank you. Joanna, welcome.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Ko Joanna Santa Barbara tōku ingoa. I'd like to say a few words about the proposal to mine for gold in Sam's Creek, Upper Takaka. I speak for the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum on this. As an organisation, we're concerned particularly with climate change, but beyond that, with ecological overshoot, the damage our extractive economy does to atmosphere, land, freshwater, and ocean. Let me start with a well-known whakatau ki. Toi tū te maraea tāne mahuta, toi tū te maraea tangaroa, toi tu te tangata. If the land is well and the sea and fresh water are well, the people will thrive. TDC is concerned with the health of the land, fresh water and nearby sea, and does some outstanding work in restoring damage. The concern I bring to you today has to do with the prevention of damage, which could be serious and irreversible. So a brief problem statement of this situation. Siren Gold, an Australian mining company, holds an exploration permit for land over a gold deposit on conservation land which is adjacent to Kahurangi National Park. This land is catchment for water that flows into the Takaka River and filters down into the Takaka Marble Aquifer. To get to the gold, they need to dig up and grind up millions of tons of rock containing thousands of tons of arsenic and lead. This ore would be processed and the residue, the tailings, would be left on the surface. After the decade or so of mining activity, it's expected that the area would be landscaped and planted by the company. So what's TDC's relationship to this project? This project is known to be favoured by the fast track approvals process, and it's likely to seek approval in that process within the next 3 years. We're also aware that although gold was not on the critical minerals list prepared for Cabinet by professionals, it was recently added to the list in Cabinet. Such a project is favoured by Cabinet. Although the fast track approvals process greatly reduces Council's power over this process, it's expected that TDC will be consulted by Siren Gold or by the reviewing committee in the process of the application. We hope you'll convey disapproval for a wide variety of reasons. You'll have heard some of them from the Sam's Creek Collective about the potential catastrophic impact on human and animal health from wind and waterborne arsenic and lead, and also, and importantly, the history of the failure of tailings dams from earthquake, intense inundation and design errors with terrible impacts. We in the Climate Forum want to say something about the climate impacts of this project and the increased risks of dam failure due to climate change. First, the impact on effects to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. TDC is aligned with the IPCC goal of decreasing emissions enough to adhere as nearly as possible to 1.5 degrees of warming. This turns out to be currently equivalent to an 8.3 reduction per annum of long-lived gases, and currently for Tasman district, the district, not the council, this means reducing from about 750 kilotons by about 60 kilotons a year. This is our fair share, and it's really hard to accomplish. It's unknown and quite questionable whether the current TDC Climate Action Plan does accomplish it. So how could the mine affect this? Bringing together mining energy use data from more than 40 published studies, and that is drawing data from hundreds of mining operations, by a mining industry research group, CEEC, and using calculations specific to underground gold mining, we can estimate that a gold mine such as the one proposed for Sam's Creek would emit about 700 kilotons of CO2. That is, supposing the mining continues for 12 years, as estimated, nearly 60 kilotons a year would be emitted. This calculation doesn't count the heavy vehicle transport of material, which would be a substantial addition, particularly if the company does cyanide processing elsewhere, as it's indicated it would. So TDC's own emissions are 15 kilotons a year. So the gold mine would emit 4 times TDC's own emissions annually. Mining is a highly carbon-intensive industry from where would Tasman make emissions cuts to compensate for these emissions and meet its emissions targets? As it is, these targets, utterly necessary for us to do our fair share, will mean that we have to change aspects of our way of life. We don't need to make things harder for ourselves by adding a dirty industry to Golden Bay. Such an industry is incompatible with regional attempts to reduce emissions. To live in balance with nature, we must cut back on our use of energy and use it for activities that we agree are essential. Getting more gold is not one of those. We don't need more gold. Most gold is used for jewelry, metals, and gold bullion stored in vaults. We don't need those. 6% might be considered useful. It's used in electronic devices. Piles of electronic waste have a higher concentration of gold than mineral ores. Gold can be and is extracted from such sources. We don't need to mine gold. The finding that surprised me most when I looked into this was the impact of climate change on the vulnerability of tailings dams. We know we'll get more extreme weather events, high rainfall and winds, higher temperatures. These factors increase acid mine leakage and the risk of blown tailings dust contaminating food and water. They also worsen erosion, slips, and landslides, which can threaten tailings deposits. More extreme changes between wet and dry conditions caused more expansion and contraction in structures, leading to weakening and possible failure of containment. Dam failure risks poisoning of agricultural and residential land and of ecological habitats, as well as risks to human health. It's hard to imagine the cost to TDC and all of us of such a failure and the loss to agriculture and tourism of a failure event. So what's our ask? Don't give your approval to this project when consulted. Speak out strongly against this mine. We don't need the gold. It'd make it seriously harder to meet our climate goals. The costs of loss and wilderness beauty is too high, and the risks of catastrophic contamination with arsenic and lead are too great. In 1949, ecologist Aldo Leopold wrote the following, which is a bit of a byline for my life. A thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. The Sam's Creek gold mining proposal is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. So that concludes the public forum because the presentation from Jenna is actually contained within the agenda, so we'll get to that in due course. So firstly, we've got declarations of interest. Do we have any? No. Then minutes to be confirmed. Someone moved the minutes from the 11th of December meeting. Councillor Mailing seconded. Councillor Dakey, all in favour, please say aye. And from the same meeting, the confidential minutes of that meeting. Moved Councillor Dakey, seconded Councillor Mackenzie. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Right, and so the first item is the presentation led by Jenna in relation to the Anaweka Waka. Welcome, Barney, Jenna, Maggie, Chris.
E tō tahi e te oramatua, e tō karaki e tūwhiatia i te rānei. Nō reira, mi noi tātou. Haruru te rangi nā tātā te rangi hia o ki runga hia o ki rā. ko koutou te rapatia te piro whiwhiri mai te piro kairum. A whinuku, a whirangi, a whipapa, a whitawa, a tihei, Mario. Kia ora. I know we're all karakia out this morning, but I'll hand over to Dina. Kia ora.
Ina kai kani here, ina koutou katoa, nice to see you all again. Just to round out who's here today, we've got Margie from Manawhenua Ki Mohua, myself from Ngāti Tamakita Waipounamu Trust, and Chris, who you all know very well, and Barney as well, who you know. Who can't be here today is Aaron Brown, and he's an independent on our working group, and Billy Wilson, who is a representative of Ngāti Kuia, so just wanted to acknowledge them. There we go, got it. So first of all, we thought we'd start by introducing first and foremost the Waka, and then we'll do a little bit of a breakdown of our working group and our structure. So I'll hand over to Chris.
Thank you. Kia ora tātou. I'm a part of the working group, which is how come I swap chairs with Mr. Kirby. Some of you have seen the Waka, which was great to take you there, and a few people haven't. And we are going to cook up a trip for those that still would like to see it soonish, I think would be good. So the Waka was founded about 12 years ago out the west coast, a place near Anaweka. It's been in a conservation process for that 12 years, so sitting in a big bath of solution, really, with largely the consolidant polyethylene glycols, the main sort of conservation process that's happening. And in March last year, the drying phase started. So the Waka's in a shed at Frontiera. A lot of people know that. It's not too secret squirrel. And a drying chamber's been set up there by the conservators from Auckland Museum. It's pretty flash little, clever little Kiwi ingenuity, the way that's been set up, so the Waka piece can be dried on site in Mohua. And it's going to be dried, I think there's another word than drying that they use, but and stable, I think, by November this year. So very gratifying to, for the process to be through to this sort of stage. And the Waka is incredibly significant. It's made of matai. The Waka piece is made of matai, New Zealand matai. It's from a probably 55 to 60 foot long, double hull, sailing, voyaging, ocean-going vessel. And not many people, I think, look at Māori folk and think, oh, you're from the sailors. I don't think that happens so much, but we certainly are. And one of the extraordinary things about this piece is that there's no physical evidence of those voyaging Waka anywhere. This is it, essentially. There is a piece in Huahine, Society Islands, that I think is smaller, and I'm not sure of the vessel, but very similar workings in it. The dating of it, so carbon dating is a very complex matter. 3 samples were taken, and the range of dates is 1226 to 1280. So, we're looking at an artifact really that is within a generation of the Wairau Bar people, so the first sort of known people to arrive here. So its significance is elevated by being a part of that very, very early period of arrival of folk here. And associated with it, of course, is that mātauranga, or that knowledge around celestial navigation, Waka building, Waka voyaging, and we are connected into those people that have that sort of knowledge nationally. So this is genuinely a national a treasure that we have in our district.
So a little bit more about those who kind of are wrapped around the Waka. So at this high level, the outer level there, we've got the iwi trust. So there's 4 iwi trusts that are claimants to the Waka. So that is Ngāti Tama, Ngāti Rārua, Te Atiawa, and Ngāti Kuia. And we come down a level from there. So the CEs of those trusts are providing oversight to this project. And at this level, you see in front of you today is the working group. So that's kind of the arms and legs of the team that are looking to how we care for this Waka beyond its current conservation state into the future, and how we can build a whare Waka basically house it. At the heart of it all, though, and probably who need the most acknowledgement are the Hokainga, or the people over in Mohua, who are represented by Mana Whenua Ki Mohua, who also have those obvious links back to the iwi trusts. Like Chris explained, the Waka's been in their care since it was found. They've done the hard yards with it, and yeah, they are the kaitiaki on the ground there, so need to acknowledge them, and we're really here on their behalf, helping them achieve their vision for the Waka. I need to move the cursor. Here we go, got it. Thanks, Chris.
Oh, yes. So the Waka's in the shed in a drying chamber. That's not it there. That's sort of when it used to be in a different place. And in terms of when it's dry and stable, it can stay where it is. So it'll always have to be in a temperature, humidity controlled environment, always, to maintain that stability. And that's the business we're in, really, is needing to produce a building that's worthy of a treasure of this significance, and to better keep it in Golden Bay and Mohua. Sure, what else? Sorry, yeah. And just to say, actually, we haven't just sort of stumbled on the idea that we need to find somewhere. So we've been thinking about this from very early, since it was found, actually, of a range of options around how to, where and how to develop a building, a facility. And you can imagine the sort of governance, management, functioning of it is, it's quite a bit to be worked out about that. And it's not that we've been doing nothing. In fact, there was a building in Tākeka that the Ministry of Culture and Heritage had a lease on, that we were looking to develop there. But the operational costs of having people there running it is a barrier, really. And so we've gone to other thinking around where and how.
Kia ora, Chris. So first and foremost, we're guided by some key principles around our vision, which is ukaipo. The Waka was found in Mohua, and our intention is for it to remain in Mohua. In doing that, we need to do it in a way where we put the integrity of the Waka, it's of utmost importance. So we respect its mana, we respect what it needs in terms of the climate control, and we respect people's connection to it. So that reason, we've also focused on ability for people to connect with the Waka. So from a technical point of view, it could remain at Fonterra. The climate control stuff, albeit, is rudimental the right word? Not good with that sort of thing. Simple. It doesn't really uphold the mana of the Waka and allow people to connect to it like we should. And the other thing that is really clear to us is partnership and working together and playing to each other's strengths and not doing this alone. So as Chris mentioned, we've really cast the net quite wide in terms of what this could look like. We've looked at standalone buildings and in all sorts of areas. We've looked at whether it should be relocated nationally within Te Tauihu, what options could look like in Mohua. And we've really landed, after some thoughtful analysis, on an option here in Tākeka. So for those that kind of picture the area, there's a piece of parkland next to the Golden Bay Museum. The reason that we're looking at that as preferred is a strong word at the moment, because there's a lot of water that needs to go under the bridge, and actually if the council's not on board with this, then we can't proceed with this vision at this place. But there's lots of benefits there in terms of a partnership with the Golden Bay Museum and not trying to do everything together. We think this would has the potential to become a precinct, to work together with the museum where we share our resources, our knowledge and that sort of thing. I need to say also what you're about to see is incredibly hot off the press. And we were under the pump a bit to get here today, to get in front of you. as such, there are a lot of the whānau that haven't seen these images. There's a lot of the staff within the iwi trust that haven't seen these images. So just really stressing you're in a privileged position. And so for that reason, we've asked that none of these be distributed, because we need to pay that respect to those people and let them see how things are kind of cooking up. So picturing Tākaka, we use the word pre-concept in terms of what this could look like. We've done it because there is so much water to go under the bridge. There's still lots of conversations, but we've engaged fine line architects to help us bring our vision to life, because it's really hard to get people excited about a mental image that is all different in everyone else's heads. So I could almost guarantee the final whare waka wouldn't look like this necessarily, but hopefully this is enough to rally kōrero around and to explore and to figure out how it might be. Probably, I mean, I'm not going to get into the architecture of the building, because I think that is too preliminary and actually signals kind of false precision at this stage. What you can kind of see there, though, in the white is the existing museum with a bit of space between the concrete plinths and what could be the whare waka. I guess what's been tried to achieve there is the concept of like an artere or joining space that creates the precincts that bring the two buildings together and allow them to operate as one. Yeah, it's probably not much more to say in terms of that pre-concept thinking. So partners and stakeholders, clearly we're talking about a piece of council land adjoined to a council building. So if this is going to have any legs, we need to have the support of council to explore this further and work through what the detailed options could look like to achieve a vision like this. Because the claim hasn't been settled yet, that's still a work in progress. The Ministry of Cultural and Heritage have effectively got legal responsibility for the waka. And we're really fortunate to have support from Te Papa through the national services. So it's really good to have those expertise around us contributing, but it is ultimately being driven by the Haukāinga and Mohua. And acknowledge the support and gratitude we have for Fonterra, who've provided a place for that waka. The Golden Bay Museum, who we've been talking to about these ideas, who share our excitement and what we can achieve together for Mohua and for the waka, and also those other expertise that we have here in Te Tauihu around Nelson Provincial Museum. So that's the kind of the headlines of the people that we've been working with. The pool is bigger and will only grow, I'm hoping, as we gain momentum. This, I guess, just to razz you up a little bit and get you excited about what could be, is another photo. Just if you're wondering what that thing in the middle is an oculus. We talked about the importance of the waka being able to connect to the sky, and navigation. That thing. That's celestial navigation. Thank you. So there's some real, I think you can see there's some really exciting concepts that can be pulled off in quite a humble way here. This detail, one of the things the whānau have talked about is not putting it in a glass coffin. We've talked about the potential to have ceiling to floor full height glass panels, so that you can actually be up close and personal with it and look at it from different perspectives. So some of those are the exciting things. That's why we keep going. There is so much we don't know, though. And that's where we need council's help to explore whether this can be achieved. We know that you have a lot of processes and decisions that would need to be made before you could actually give a proper no-go sort of decision on something like this. But also, if you're not on board now, we don't want to waste our precious time and resources. So I'll come to this at the end, we are looking for that kind of indicative support for us to put our time and energy into exploring this further. some of the things that we need to think about is the land currently owned by council. Does it continue to be owned by council? Do you have an interest to see a different use there? It could be leases, all sorts of things. Funding. Probably the elephant in the room. We're not here asking for money. We understand that council's pulled in many different directions and everything's coming down the pipeline at you at the moment. We think we're in the best position to raise the capital and to fundraise for this. But what that looks like, again, is a big question. Who could partner with us? How we can tap into that? The building, is it something that is owned by a trust? Is it something that is vested back to council? Is it something owned by iwi? Is it, there's all of those options that need to be explored in more detail. Probably one thing we're quite clear on, if we can pull this off though, is that the hokainga and iwi have kaitiakitanga of that space and that that care and, for lack of a better word, ownership of the waka. And to achieve all this is going to require partnerships and relationships and MOUs and all of that kind of thing. So a lot of water to go under the bridge yet. And just an example of some of the things that need considering. Our appetite, sustainable, low risk. We've got precious resourcing as well. So we need to be really careful about our time, our energy, and our money investing in these sort of things. And again, I can't stress this enough, our partnership approach. Yep, that's probably enough on that slide. This, in all honesty, is probably a bit optimistic, but yeah, we're optimistic. So there's a bit to work through here. We're in Chris has talked about the Waka conservation. We're in phase 1 at the moment, which is really just fleshing things out, understanding what it could look like, who wants to work with us, where can we work, starting to build some funding relationships and starting to build those relationship understandings, MOUs, those sorts of things. Phase 2, if we align ourselves and we're all on the same page, that's when we start getting into the consenting and the actual design side of things. There's no point going there if we can't steal up what needs to be done in phase 1. And then phase 3 is the exciting thing. That's pretty much where you nail it, build it, and have it done. So you can see this is not going to happen overnight. We're still very early stages. So yeah, while we're here, how can you help? Yeah, really encourage you to support this in principle so that we can work with council officers to explore it further and answer some of those questions and present you with decisions, as well as our iwi trust as well. This is one piece of the puzzle. You're really fortunate to have fantastic staff here at Tasman District Council with great expertise and advice, and we'd love the benefit of working with them to answer some of those questions we have. What barriers might there be? How might we overcome them? We talked about we're probably in the best position to raise capital, but having you publicly endorse the projects through letters of support, through statements and your planning documents can go a long way, because then that's a clear signal that actually we are not just cooking up our own idea with no support, and it reduces the risk. Potentially in-kind consent processing. And I mean, I'd be rude not to say we would welcome a capital contribution, but that's not the aim of the game. So yeah, well done.
Kia ora, Jenna. It's a bit like Barney's comment about the developing relationship with the little however on the end, isn't it? So we're not asking for funding, however. If it happened to become available, we wouldn't say no. I thank you very much for the presentation. So again, opportunity for people if they have any questions. Councillor Kinnermont.
Just a quick one. Thanks for coming along, team. I've been lucky enough to go and see this waka. What's the chance of other pieces of this waka being located on the coast and those being introduced next to or with this? And I'm thinking, is this a one-off display, or have you looked at or actively looking at other sections that might come into this?
The site that this one was found, an archaeological authority was sought, and archaeologists, the whānau, and went out there and really looked around that area. with a digger, actually. It was digger archaeology. So legitimised, yep, through HNZ. Because, and we're not looking for pieces really, generally, but we have a sense that they present themselves. And so it was a bit of a decision to do that. But we thought if there was something sitting there about to come washing out in the next storm, it made sense to go and have a look and find out. So there's no other cultural material in that site at all. And so whether there are other pieces, and the whole mystery of it is, how come it was there? Where's the rest? You know, you would, if you damaged a piece of a waka like that, you'd take it out, rebuild another one, put it in. You know, there's a lot of unknowns about it. So about whether there's any other pieces on the coast, unknown. But should there be and they emerge, and they would need to go through the same conservation process. Probably not over quite so many years, but yeah, like, you know, 8 or 9 years or something too.
Thank you, Councillor Greening.
Jenna, very exciting concept. I think you genuinely would have the support of the council and probably the wider community in terms of the asset. I probably consider, given its age, probably the founding artefact in the Nelson region. And I take it from the presentation we had earlier that it wasn't found on the west coast, it was found on the west coast of the bay near Motueka. Given its ocean going, I'm just wondering, have you explored also other locations, or are you particularly tied to Motueka? It's ocean going, so I would imagine that it probably landed in Nelson as well. And I think it's quite common for, certainly when you read the Waitangi reports, that there were ocean-going vessels that were commuting between both islands as well, so north and south. So I'm just wondering, this is really also a strong opportunity to really promote the founding people of this area, not just Founders Park being colonial. Have you thought of putting it also in Nelson if you can't get the funding support in Motueka or the location? I've seen other...
So I think we probably need to clarify before you go on too much further, the location, because I'm not sure Motueka is actually where it's being suggested to be.
Oh, sorry, Golden Bay.
So I'll come to Chris to answer the question.
Thanks, Councillor Greening. It was found on the west coast, so west coast. Anaweka is above, it's north of Kahurangi Lighthouse. So really out in that wild west coast, and after a massive, one of those big storms, I don't know what they're called, Fahi Gita and others, emerged then out of a wet area. So yeah, so definitely looking in Mohua and Golden Bay and Takaka for sites. We've looked for years at what's possible there, and I think the thing about this, you know, it gets called a park. It's actually freehold land, fee simple, next to the museum. And one of the attractions to it really is that, as you know, council gives money each year to the museum. I'm making numbers up now, maybe 70,000 a year or more, and some grants. So having a facility that's opened and people are in there running it and attaching to that is one of the big attractions of it. So not Motueka, no. And I think Nelson Provincial Museum have been involved with us around this, and there would be ongoing technical expertise needed for the continual monitoring of how it's going, you know, once it's in place. So we certainly have a strong relationship there, and actually it's been, I don't know, the listener would mind me saying this, but, you know, she considers it's one of the most important artefacts in New Zealand. So we are looking for it to be in Takaka, and, you know, council has the opportunity to impact whether that happens or not. You
wouldn't, you haven't considered Founders Park at all?
No, I think the answer to that was no, Mark. They are very focused currently on Mohua, and that is where the energy and effort is going currently.
Okay, I would just also keep that option open if you're looking for additional funding, because then you can draw on both councils and also have the Waka really promoted in an area where a lot of people will be able to see it.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Shellcrest.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Can't wait to get over and have a look. I think it's an amazing opportunity for the bay, even that tourism space, getting people into the bay and and that you might be able to pick up some, funding through that. But no, exciting project, and can't wait to see where it leads.
Thank you, Jenna, for leading that conversation, Chris for your contribution, and Margie and Barney for your support. And we look forward to having a further conversation about at least the in principle decision, noting there's a lot of water to go under the proverbial bridge. So thank you very much. Right, next up we have got Jamie and temporary road closures. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, councillors. Welcome back. I'd like to take the report as read, but I will note an update to the spelling of Park Street. When this report was initially being drafted at the start of December, the spelling of Park Street was PAH, and the current spelling is PA with a macron above the A. So just please note that the resolution that we'll ask you to approve will have the correct spelling of Park Street. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. Questions and/or moving and seconding. Councillor Murray.
Happy to move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dowler. Excellent. Can't see the resolution, but I assume the resolution will have Park Street spelled PA. I will put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Well, that was nice and simple, Jamie. I like a good report first up, first recommendation of the new year, just like that. Long may that continue. All the way till the next report. Jamie, Joe, over to you in terms of the Streets for People update, Wensley Road and Aranui Road.
Yeah, thank you. So again, with this report, I'm happy to take it as read. And yeah, unless Joe has any other information to add, we're happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. It's open for question, comments, feedback, and/or moving and/or seconding. Councillor Kinnermont.
Thank you. I'm happy to move. The pillows, you call them, in Wensley Road, you said after in here they're going to be removed. Is that confirmed?
Correct.
Great, thank you very much. It'll help me getting to and from work without undercarriage of my car going missing a bit. I'd also like to comment on the cycle lane in Mapua and the concrete strips, separators. I'm fully in support. And I think most people in the room know that to have them removed. I think this is a indication of what people power can do, and that we've had a petition to this group here, and also we've had a number of people online on Facebook have their comments, and I want to thank Jamie and his team for coming to this conclusion. The concrete separators can be removed, and so on behalf of the people who have not fallen off to their bikes over the concrete separators in Mapua, thank you very much for coming to this conclusion, and I hope the meeting today approves the removal of them. That's me. Thank you.
So you're moving the resolution?
I am, with great glee.
Councillor Mailing.
Yeah, I'm happy to second the resolution. Before the meeting a couple of days ago, when I got the report and I'd read it, I had a discussion with Jamie because I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. And Jamie, you might want to outline those. As I understand it, we're not taking anybody's property in Wensley Road to widen this area. The sad thing is we lose the 30k speed over the top, but we could fix that in the future because people have become used to it. And I'm not getting the phone calls about speed humps anymore now because it was only 3 instead of 5. And I'll take some credit for that because I certainly got a lot of flack when there were 5. But now people have got used to that. And I know some people are still going a little bit high, but I think in time, even though we will have a separate cycleway, it still will still be not the widest road that we've got. And it's got a huge volume of traffic coming down it. But the cycleway and the fact that Jamie has liaised with the people that are affected, I think, stands us a good step. So if you could just find a bit of that, Jamie.
Hey, thank you, James. Yeah, so the issue of speed limit is an interesting one. So the current setting of speed limits rule does not allow us to retain a 30 km/h permanent speed limit on a road like Wensley Road. The 30 km/h speed limit that's been implemented as part of the Streets for People project was done under a piece of legislation that enabled us to set pilot speed limits for a limited period of time. And so that's what's happened with Wensley Road. So ultimately it needs to be legally restored to 50 km/h, just as a matter of law. When the works are complete, there will be a raised platform where the zebra crossing is. So there will be an element of traffic calming associated with the finished product. So it won't be a series of speed cushions like we have now, which have proved, as that type of treatment is, just somewhat controversial. And I know our colleagues in Nelson City are having similar challenges with some of their similar calming features. So yeah, it's just a bit of a quirk of the way the legislation works. We don't get to just choose our own speed limits. We have to follow the law.
Yep. And we're not taking people's land. The land we're using, as I understand it, is road reserve. And we bought that other land with the intention of being able to widen this. And this has been going on for many years.
Yeah, correct. Like over a long period of time, the council has had designations on strips of properties adjacent to road, and has over time, I guess, acquired those strips through certain circumstances. And we had one last year where the circumstance arose that we could purchase our property at the corner of Wensley and Waverley and obtain that strip, which we have done. And now we are in a position to use the land that we have available to just make minor improvements for the benefit of everyone.
Okay, thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. I've got Councillor Graney, Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Walker, Councillor Mara, and Councillor Dakey. So much for the first item being, didn't last that long. Councillor Graney.
Thanks. No, it's probably not going to be as fast for the rest of the day, I imagine, given all the exciting financials that we're staring down the barrel of. My concern really is twofold. First of all, we're putting in place a cycle lane that wasn't known to the community beforehand and wasn't trialled. And I think that is a concern, that we are then some will see this as a stealthy way of removing people's car parks. So I am concerned about that. And we've had repeated visits from the community and this council itself reversing its position on that issue of taking people's parks away. My other concern pretty much is this road has become, over time, quite overloaded with initiatives. We've increased buses, which means there's greater frequency on this road with buses than there has ever been in the past. And we're promoting this as a great way, or a great route to cycle on, which I also have concerns about. I don't think it should have been. I think there are much safer and better options around this road to be promoting cycling routes. But I am also concerned that by putting a cycling lane on the road in this very narrow area, you are, given we've increased bus use, and given also that the speed will go back up to 50, there is a high likelihood of someone being hit And so I'm uncomfortable with that. I think there is a serious risk that we should be mindful of. And I think that we have not had bicycle incidents that I can recall where the bicycle has been on the footpath. So I would prefer, rather than the cycle lane being put on the road, that the cycle lane is lifted off the road and put on a footpath. That's my preference, and therefore I can't support Resolution 4 putting bicycle lanes on the road, increasing the risk of someone being clipped on a narrow part of the road. They need to be physically separated, and a footpath does that. And I think we should continue, as we have done in the past, of having a shared path in this arrangement to ensure that bikes are not on the road in this very dangerous segment of Wensley Road. And I hope that the movers and seconders might reconsider their position and remove Resolution 4 from what they are supporting.
Thank you, Councillor Greening. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Mayor. Gosh, Jamie and your team, what a journey we've been on with the Streets for People projects. I guess, you know, I come back to the walking and cycling strategy and the ambition that we had with that strategy and what we wanted to achieve. The Streets for People projects, we received, you know, 95% of the funding from central government to implement these. My question is, at what point will we formally report back on the progress we made against the targets overall on the walking and cycling strategy? And then I have another point after that.
Through the Mayor, so there's going to be regular reporting over a long period of time. And so we've got performance measures built into our transport activity management plan. One of those performance measures is around the use of cycle lanes and the proportion of people reporting their preferred way of getting to work is via a work or school on cycle. And that's recorded through the census, which is, you know, semi-regular. So as the walking and cycling strategy acknowledged, this is a long-term game. And yeah, the Streets for People budgets and the program itself allowed us to take a big step forward from what we had probably initially planned. So it set us off on a good path. And yeah, what we're presenting today is just one more step towards that long-term goal.
All right, no, thanks for that, because, you know, I always am interested in, you know, these high-level strategies with these targets to make sure that actually our interventions are taking us to where we need to get to. I guess with regards to the concrete separators on Mapua, interesting to note that, you know, nothing's ever straightforward, because at the Mapua community meeting on Monday night, here's two of the questions that were asked when they were advised that we were talking about removing the concrete separators at our meeting today. Oh, well, what are they going to be replaced with? Second one, and so how are we going to be policing whether people are parking in the cycleways? So, you know, there will be subsequent discussions about these things. It's, you know, it's complicated.
It's people.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you, through you. Yeah. I guess my question is, like, with the Aranui Road, so we put this project out there. Yes, as Councillor Mackenzie said, it was government funded, most of it. I'm just wondering, when we spent that money, because I know that we were close to having spent most of it, and then we've had to uplift speed humps on Wensley Road and other things, was the cost of the independent safety assessment done within the funding that we had, or have we taken it out of another stream of our funding to get that safety assessment done?
So yeah, the NZTA funds expired on the 30th of June 2024. And so any subsequent work is being funded by the council out of our cycle lanes budget. Yep.
So do we have an actual line item now to tell us what these costs are in actual fact
post the money that we had to spend by June 2024?
Yes.
Okay, I'd be quite keen to see that. And the other thing is for me is what learnings do we take out of this amazing projects that we've been doing with regards to calming features using of concrete separators, for example, for our future projects?
It's been a real journey. I don't know if I'll run through sort of all the learnings I've taken from it. Certainly as a team, we've discussed various learnings, and we have documented many of those. It was a very unique type of program, not one that our council had come across before, and I think a lot of other councils have found themselves in the same position. We've certainly learned a lot about the types of facilities that our community likes and don't like, and the concrete separators is a classic example. We did test the boundaries with things like shared paths and bi-directional shared paths, and trying things that are a little bit out of the ordinary. And what we've learned from that is that people prefer to have facilities that are appropriate to each different user type, that is, separate out the users. And so when we talk about shared paths, for example, on Wensley Road, that we know that would be problematic for some of our pedestrians. So introducing cyclists who move at a higher speed and carry a lot of mass onto a limited space creates real hazards and a feeling of being unsafe for a particularly accessible, people with limited mobility. So that's what I've taken from it, is how important it is to design appropriate treatments for each user type. And we've played around with widths, we've squeezed widths down, and the Aranui road separators show that eventually the reason design standards have come with recommended minimum widths is for a reason. And if we try and test those limits, because we often try to retrofit these things into really constrained situations because we just didn't have the budget to build perfect. So what we tried to do was build improvement. And so really testing those boundaries is very challenging. And trying to communicate that to our community was also challenging because, a lot of people have big ambitions, but we don't have the budgets to match the ambitions. So, yeah, I've learned that I'd be careful about putting my hand up for this free money again. Yeah. But I have no doubts that it's taken us a big step forward towards our big goal of the strategy. And if you're not trying to take steps towards implementing your strategy, what are you doing? So I think it's been really cool.
Thanks, Jamie. Very good, comprehensive answer. Councillor Murray.
Just as a side on to your comment, Jamie, is that you would have probably been up for more criticism if this council hadn't applied for the funding. So I think you're in a no-win situation. But my question relates to the safety assessment, and I know it's included in there for transparency, but we ignored it in essence, and we disagreed with the findings of the safety assessment. So at what stage do we get those? Like, I guess you probably agreed with the part that the concrete separators didn't cause a hazard, but the recommendation was to add the upright things to it. We decided, no, these are going. So what was the benefit of the safety assessment when we come back to in-house expertise that I guess we probably believe more than the external stuff?
So throughout the whole program, we got independent safety audits done. That's a condition of funding. What those safety audits do is sometimes it doesn't answer the actual question that we have. And so with a post-construction safety audit of the layout of Aranui Road, for example, probably would not have answered the question about whether we should keep the separators or not. It's a slightly different thing. They'll make recommendations about other sort of basic safety features, sight distance, the quality of markings, but fundamentally, it doesn't answer some of the hard design questions that we have to answer as an organisation and as a client obtaining this advice. Audit and a safety assessment can give recommendations, but still it's up to the council to make decisions. And it's like any report that you might receive from staff. Staff might make a recommendation, but the decision would be do something else.
Because at the end of that, it was interesting that from staff perspective didn't instantly support the upright vertical separators because obviously been incidents of handlebars and other things. So it was quite a contrasted safety assessment in terms of where we've ended up with a recommendation, which I'm happy it's made my neighbour very happy. But it's just interested. I guess it's a good precedent in terms of information used to make the final decision like we do around here. So thanks.
Councillor Dakey.
Thank you, through the Mayor. I just want to pass on to the team thanks from a resident in Wensley Road who has had very thorough dealings lately and very positive feedback about the dealings with council and their interactions. I actually just wanted to thank you and the team that sits behind you for putting up with some real, that I word it nicely, well, keyboard warriors will go as well. And and a few rednecks and things that are out there who think bikes should be banned or whatever. But thank you for the project. And, when I look around, the things that the team has achieved are worth it. When I go to work in the morning and I see pedestrian crossings, right? And kids are able to cross the road safely to school, it's worth it. So I thank you for that, and thank you to your team.
No, it's not essential to have a question. It may become essential to have a question. I'm not really looking to do round two. We've got a lot to get through. The resolution's been moved and seconded.
It's just an administrative matter, which is, can the minutes record my vote against resolution 4, please?
Yeah, we'll get to that after the vote's been either put, but yes, noted. So all those in favour, please say aye. Against? So are you going to vote against, Mark? You have to vote against to have your vote recorded.
I just want the minutes to record my opposition to resolution 4 because you put them all together. I'm not going to indulge people to start pick and choose. Like, I'm happy to note that should you vote against the resolution. Well, I support the rest of it, as I made quite clear.
But we don't get that. Imagine if we went around every resolution that had multiple parts and people started to want bits, even though they said, no, Councillor Greening, either vote against and I'll have your vote recorded, or don't.
So just as a procedural matter, on other occasions, you have broken out the resolution where there is a split voice on it.
Absolutely, indeed, we have done that, but we haven't done that. We haven't done that at this point, and and that wasn't requested, and we haven't done it.
This is recorded, and so I'm quite happy that it's been recorded, and I've raised the concern of safety on resolution 4, and if there is a death, I won't be criminally liable. Thank you.
Excellent. Right. So the resolution is passed, I think unanimously. Next up, we have reserve classifications for Richmond, Lakes-Murchison and Baigent's Bush. Welcome, Anna.
Kia ora koutou. I'm happy to take my report as read, but I just wanted to draw your attention to an error that we found while we were preparing the report, which was when we put out the proposals, there was 10 reserves that were actually in fact already classified. And so they had been removed from attachment 1, which is the table of reserves we're asking you to classify today. Those were 2 in Richmond at Ben Cooper Park, and the others were mainly in Tapawera. So this the resolutions that you've been asked to look at today, we're asking to have the minutes of the hearing held on the 10th of December confirmed, note the error, and then use your delegation from the Minister of Conservation to resolve to classify the reserves listed in attachment 1, and then approve us preparing and submitting a notice to the New Zealand Gazette outlining the reserve classifications agreed. And then we will also, noting that we will also consider the other matters raised by submitters when we're preparing the draft management plans for these reserves. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Anna. It's open, Councillor Mackenzie and then Deputy Mayor Bryant.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to move the resolution. I was a member of the hearing panel. It was a very, and I must say, was very ably chaired by Councillor Ellis. And I just really want to thank Anna for her work. I mean, I think you must know more about all of the reserves and the Tasman District Council than anybody else. And so it's always a pleasure dealing with your information, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Deputy Mayor Bryant.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just following from Councillor Mackenzie, I was a member of that reserve, obviously being the Lakes-Murchison ward councillor, and it was explained to me yesterday in some detail around the parcels that were misidentified and the process we've gone through there, so I'm happy with that. Just like to thank Anna and her team for all the work they've done around this. Been quite a challenge, and as Councillor Mackenzie said, you probably know more about reserves than anyone else. And thank the elected members who were on the hearing panel and deliberations, in particular Councillor Ellis. I think that would have been your first chairing a hearing, so well done. And I'm happy to second.
Okay, thank you. And that brings us to the aforementioned Councillor Ellis.
Thank you for that, everybody. Look, I just wanted to add my thanks to the team. You know, it took a massive amount of work and a lot of information that was really tricky to find, which explains why the issue arose later. And so I have to really acknowledge that. It's the administration in our systems that are an issue, and it's been a great opportunity to make sure they're all up to date and well done. I mean, our reserves are so significant to our community, and the work that the reserve team done and you guys have done through the strategy and policy to get this well organised and through is significant for our community. And I'd also like to thank those that took the time to submit in writing and in person, because it's really valuable to have that community input, and we're going to get an opportunity to use that even further as we work out these reserve management plans. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. If there is no further comment or question, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Next up, we have bylaw revocation and minor edits. Dwayne and Kat, welcome.
Hello, koutou. So we are seeking the approval for the revocation of both the introductory bylaw and the speed limits bylaw. We're also recommending several minor changes to other bylaws to align with that revocation of the introductory bylaw. I'll take the report as read, but I'll just impress upon you that these revocations and changes are really more operational and administrative in nature. The substance of the regulations are not changing. It's just how they're organised is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's open for questions, comments, moving and or seconding. Councillor Mackenzie.
Happy to move.
Thank you. Councillor Hill. All right, thank you. All right, as in, if there's nothing further, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Next up, Acting CEO Steve, amendments to elected members' allowances and recovery of expenses policies on page 123.
Thanks very much. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take the report as read and perhaps in tabling it point out that for some time the technology allowance that we pay to councillors has been a little more generous than some of the recommendations that we had, certainly at the start of the triennium. And so in that vein, we've looked at the provision of the hardware that we've got, which is also somewhat above what initial specs were 3 years ago. We believe that the opportunity for us to delay spending some capital by extending the life of these devices for a little bit longer and minimising the expenditure for technology allowance for elected members is in keeping with the current economic climate. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. It's open for questions. Councillor Hill and then Councillor Kinnermont.
Not really a question, but just a little rural comment. So, good to get a laugh already, and I've hardly begun. Not all things are equal, and I think when you live in town, you probably get pretty easy access maybe to internet. Not sure, but at our little farm, we've tried 5 or 6 different providers, all shite. And the only thing that works for us in terms of internet is Starlink, actually, and we pay $169 a month for that. And I wouldn't better zoom in on any of the other providers we've had in the past. So not everything's equal. So I just see a little statement around reflect the reality of a more competitive market for the provision of internet broadband. So, you know, that's not the case for everybody. And I'm certainly supportive of us keeping our costs down, but wanted you to know that. Thank you.
Councillor Kinnermont.
Thank you, through the Mayor. How did you arrive at $650?
Good question. So it wasn't just to halve the current allowance, but it was subjective rather than empirical in terms of how we got there. So if members feel that that the 650 is insufficient, that's something that we can take back and we can provide more empirical evidence to support a greater or lesser number. But it might go either way.
So one of these things is I can buy for about $600-700.
You're not one of those, you can't. We'd be fortunate to get one for about $1,800. Yeah.
I was obviously thinking of a small size. Okay, well, thank you.
So I've got Councillor Deputy Mayor Bryant, Councillor Murray, and then Councillor Mailing.
Thank you. The Mayor, Steve, just one question in relation to the retaining the laptops. If it was decided that they're at the end of their life, which they are, would there be an option to offer them to councillors at book value?
Through the Mayor, no, there wouldn't, not at book value, because the process that we follow for disposing of assets of this nature is fair sale value or fair market value. So we'd have to look at what the best way to describe it for this audience would be that we would look at something like Trade Me, and we would find out what they're selling for in the marketplace, and then it would be offered to something which is comparable.
Yeah, whether it's what was the term I used, book value or fair market value. Would there be an option of, because I know last term pretty much we decided that the ones we had previously were getting towards the end of their life, and I know some of us are still using ones from several terms ago. So yeah, so fair market value, book value, if councillors were willing to pay that, would that be an option?
It would be an option. The distinction that I'd make here is that the end of its useful life may not end at the end of the triennium. So for a member who was either not elected or choose not to stand, it's not necessarily the case that you'd be able to buy your laptop out as you left.
Understand that, but if they were.
Yep. Yep.
So something to consider.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To be fair, this is the most useless piece of technology I've ever had, because I'm always locked out and I always need passwords. And I have to have a telephone to authenticate to get back in. But in terms of the sentiment of the motion, bar the conversation from my more rural colleagues, because I hadn't thought of that. But to test it, I'm happy to move it on, I guess, on the assumption that across the board, including from our ELT members and our staff members, we look at allowances and reflect that in an overall view of cost cutting. So it's good that you've looked at this little one. I suspect there's many, and that will come down to personal use of cars and uses of IT and cell phones for work and non-work places. So on those bases, I think it's a good idea. I'll move it.
Okay. It's been moved. I've got a number of other speakers, so thank you for moving it, Councillor Margaret. Councillor Mayling, Councillor Ellis and Councillor Walker.
I'll just second it. I don't need to say anything.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
I'm sorry, no, I actually appreciate what Councillor Hill has stated, and I hadn't considered that because it seemed fair enough to me in my situation, but not all around the table are equal in the experiences that they have. And if we're wanting to encourage a more varied representation around the table, I'm not sure that all would be in that same position to be able to carry some of the costs. I mean, personally for me, it costs me money as well to do a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. So while I was supportive of it, I'm starting to think, I think we need to think about this on a bit of a mature level and perhaps have some opportunity to apply for those that do require it, some sort of ability to cover those costs, which I hadn't, unfortunately, I hadn't brought to you earlier because I hadn't considered, especially the example of the rural position that some people are in, but that may not be the only financial constraint that people have around the table.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I missed the first part of your question because I was having a conversation with Richard, but I'm pretty sure I've got the gist of it. I think there is a possibility for us to explore how additional provision might be made in the same way that it is for either officers or elected members who travel and then claim expenses for certain things that are not necessarily the run-of-the-mill. But I would have to take advice on that from our governance team. I'd have to look at what the rules and regulations say in terms of elected member allowances. And I would suggest that for the purposes of today's conversation, whatever it is that we do, be it additional funding for Starlink for rural members or additional types of technology for different elected member situations, it would fall outside of this policy. So I can take that back to the governance team and look at what we might be able to do in addition to this, or as well as this.
Because we do have the example, we've got a Māori ward in the next term. I would imagine that that would involve a hell of a lot of travel, and not being able to hook into various Wi-Fi's could be a particular issue. So I think it's something we actually need to flag.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Sir Mayor. I have no issue around the laptop part, giving it back. The term's finished. I don't have an issue with that part, and so I would be happy to vote on that as a single line item. I do have an issue when it comes back to cutting back our communication allowance, because I too are rural and I often can't download stuff. I've physically got to drive somewhere. I can't claim that travel cost. That comes at my cost. And unlike some councillors, I just can't tap into resources the same. And that comes at a personal cost. And if you want people and you want diversity around this table, you really need to look at what next term looks like, because not only are we increasing the amount of councillors, decreasing our remuneration package, you're now saying we're going to be cut back on how we can communicate. I don't know, but Councillor Day can probably tell you how many times my phone's been beeping today, and I assure you that's not my family. So I'll leave here and I'll have to make a whole lot of calls and things at a cost. And I do it because I care about my community, but it comes to a point where actually, we can sustain doing these roles, because they're becoming more and more part-time, because we're going to have to go and get other jobs to sustain being able to do what we do. So I wouldn't be voting for the two together. Happy for the device to go, and no comeback on anything on that. But when it comes to my communication allowance being rural, not as rural as Councillor Hill though, I would query it and I wouldn't be voting for it.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps I'll just respond, because there's an option. I've been messaging backwards and forwards for the lane while I've been listening to the Korero and Chambers. There's an indication from government that the pool for elected members is going to increase. for the next triennium. In fact, I think it takes place in the new financial year, in addition to the additional member which we have got. And that's both for elected members and also for the mayor report. But however, I'm more than happy if elected members wish that we let the paper lie and we bring it back to you with consideration for, let's call it extra or additional provision for independent circumstance. But it's been moved and seconded.
Yeah, I know it's been moved and seconded yet, so we can Councillor Dakey.
That sounds like good wisdom there, perhaps setting it by. I think what Chris has raised, for me, I'm at zero. I mean, there's no extra cost I wear from running this, but then I hear Chris's situation, I realise there is extra cost. So I think there could be a fair debate about maybe a different rate for rural or local, whatever. So I think there's a little bit more work to do just to clarify. Certainly for me, I support lowering it, but I just think it might need a little bit of tidying.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. I mean, I think that it's a slippery slope once you start going down the allowances for everything, because so many people have so many. We've discussed childcare in the past. There is an endless list of circumstances that different people face, and when you put your name forward for these roles, you do absolutely have to weigh. You do absolutely have to weigh up the challenges and the circumstances. And is that perfect? No. You know, is that the ideal situation? No. But it kind of is the situation. And again, it's the same with internet. So I also run Starlink. Would I have it even if I wasn't on the council? Probably, because I like to watch Netflix. Should the council pay for me to watch Netflix? No. Where is the balance between, you know, it doesn't cost you more to connect your council stuff. If you've got Starlink and you're paying the full Monty, that's unlimited that's unlimited access. Alongside it, you know, watching all the things you like to watch and do the things you like to do and having all your internet connectedness for everything else you do in your life, it enables you to do the council bit. So I'm happy to leave it lie on the table and have it revisited. If that's the wish of the council, someone will need to move that. But I do think that you open up the whole debate about allowances and different circumstances and different challenges that people have, and you may not find that the conversation gets easier. It may get more difficult. So, Councillor Mackenzie.
I just wanted to indicate that I'm in support of it. I totally get the point around rural, but actually you don't have to be that rural to need Starlink. I need Starlink as well where I live. But in actual fact, I think what we're saying is that, you know, it's kind of like a token sort of gesture that actually times are tough for everybody. And so I'm happy to support. Let's just be bold and halve the allowance and get on with it. So I wanted to indicate support for the resolution.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. So unless there is some wish to do otherwise, I have a motion moved and seconded, which I will put. So I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? You want your vote recorded? Councillor Greening, you wish to have your vote recorded?
I guess it
oh, did he? Perhaps it was just, must have been a delay. I'm pretty sure it was a delay. It definitely came through at the time I said against. Apologies, Councillor Green. Right. The resolution is carried. The next one is recommendations from Motueka Community Board transfer of funds between budget lines. Gavin and Mike.
Good morning, elected members. As the Mayor has introduced the paper, we'll take the paper as read, and Mike and I are on hand here to answer any questions from the Council.
Okay, thank you. It's open for questions, comments, or Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to move the resolution, but I just also want to flag I'm perplexed by 2.3 and an internal budget in the same financial year move that the Community Board doesn't have the authority to do that. So I get the carryover from 2023-24, but the item 2.3 number 4, isn't that just a change of budget within the existing budget year?
Right. That is correct, but traditionally the Community Board budgets are actually controlled by Council. So I don't believe the boards have the delegated authority to
move items between categories within their own budget at this point in time.
So just through the mayor, the clarity would be good because this is the first time. So I chaired the community board for 2 years. It's the first time I've had a discussion about an internal transfer in the same year. So I understand the out of year, but I was perplexed that this had to go to this extent. And saying that, happy to move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Happy to second, but also endorse what Councillor Murray says about the transfer within the funds in the same financial year and the delegation level for the community board.
Okay, or something that can be considered at the next time the community board delegations are considered post the next election. Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. If there's no further comment, I'll put the resolution. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Next up, we've got risk and assurance policy adoption. Amy, Deirdre.
So the first paper is the risk and assurance policy adoption, which has been recommended from Audit and Risk for Council for adoption. Deirdre and I are happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. It's open for comments, questions, feedback, moving and or seconding. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you. I'm happy to move it. It's been through the Audit and Risk Committee who recommended it to this full council for adoption.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Butler. Happy to don't want to say anything further. If there are no further questions, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. And next up, Amy, while you're here, the risk report.
Thank you. So this is the quarterly risk report. Now there's a little bit of delay because this went to Audit and Risk in December and this was the next meeting following that to bring that to council. I'm in the process of preparing the next quarterly report, which will come up in March to council. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Again, open for questions. And or moving or seconding its receipt. Deputy Mayor Brian.
So just for my clarity, and because I was under a few challenges at the time, this has been to risk and audit and discussed at risk and audit, so there was no red flags raised or anything. So with that, I'm happy to move it.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just before I'm happy to second. So if we go to page 141, and that's got your residual risk ratings, and we've got disaster events. What's our treatment for the disaster events? Events? Because I didn't think we were putting any funds aside in our disaster fund. What's the treatment that we've got proposed for the disaster event?
So this disaster event risk is the strategic risk, so that there's a lot of things underneath that, and we do a lot of things under there. So, we fund CEDAM, we do work in the environmental science space, we do business continuity plans. So it's really sitting here as an ongoing long strategic risk that we need to be aware of and to continue doing things.
Okay, so I'd love to continue doing things. So I'll take you down to SO4, which is the projects and programs. Are we saying by this we're accepting the impact and loss suffered as a result of program failure to deliver projects? We're just accepting that, we're not treating it?
We do a number of things in that area, and we are not. We're not doing anything more, but we're not actively pursuing new avenues. I suppose accept is wrong. How do I phrase this?
So just for clarity, so if we've had learnings from other times where there's been failures in project delivery, we're just accepting that, we're not treating that and have ongoing mitigation.
Okay, I'll talk to this one. So typically in a project and the program space, they have each program and project has a very prescribed risk management process, and so the control of that is within the project and the program space. So strategically, we defer that responsibility to the project and program space. If something is
gets beyond their control, then it gets escalated up to that more strategic level, at which case we will put a treatment in.
So what is, sorry, Mr. Through, Mayor. So what level would that be? Because if it's accepted at strategic level and saying it's managed at project level,
yes,
that's the bit that's missing here. When would it get elevated from project level to strategic?
When the delegated authority that's within the project can't be met by those that have that delegated authority, so therefore it has to go up to governance level to because they have a higher authority to be able to make decisions.
Okay, happy to second.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kinnermont.
Very quickly, this is a quarterly risk report. So this comes to this group every quarter.
Yes, that's the intention.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, I'll put the resolution. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Next up, we have the 6 monthly financial report, which ended on 31st of December, but obviously this is the first council meeting post that date. So on page 150, Mike, well, just Mike. Oh no, Paul. Welcome, Paul. Paul, over to you.
All right. We have concentrated this quarter on 3 key metric areas: operating results, capital spend, and net debt. We've used the balanced benchmark, balanced budget benchmark in there, which is contained in the annual reports and annual plans, as a good proxy for the operating results. And though not perfect, it is probably the most effective defined by regulation measure we've got there, and easily representable in a graphic. Any questions?
Thanks, Paul. Mike, do you have anything to add before I go to questions? And I'll come to Councillor McKenzie.
Just through Mr. Mayor, I'd draw councillors' attention to section 7, covering debtors and receivables. This section has had a rework on the approach we've taken in previous financial reports. In particular, we're giving you more information about the experience of the team in terms of the penalties we're applying for late payment, but also the number of people missing payments, particularly on direct debit. That is actually a good news story in that we're not seeing a significant uptick in terms of people paying their rates. That doesn't mean they don't have some financial stresses on them. And it's also a reflection of the proactive way in which that revenue team works with ratepayers and other customers of council to try and get them onto payment plans and avoid having to issue penalties and keeping people on track in terms of meeting their obligations to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you very much through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my question in the end might go to role clarity. So if I come to page 153 of the report and we've got a maintenance analysis and we talk about the overspending and water supply, transportation and reserves and facilities, which are expected to be, I don't know, in total maybe about 3 million overspend at the end of the financial year. I guess the thing that interests me is that, you know, we've sat around this table and we've set budgets in these areas. And now we're being told that in actual fact, we're doing a program of work and we're going to exceed the budget by 3 million. But I don't recall at any point anybody coming back around this table and saying, well, actually, here are some choices that you could make. You could either agree to sit within your existing budget and here's the consequences of it, and that's a choice that you could make, or we're just being presented with the fact that actually we set a budget, we have no choice, and we're going to be 3 million over. So how, as governors, are we being given an opportunity to change the financial forecast outturn for the council?
You recall when you did the long-term plan last year, there was a lot of debate about the budgets and cutting the budgets back. And during those debates, discussions were had about the risks of some of those cuts, particularly in the wastewater area, where we knew that the reactive maintenance was trending high last year. And we decided, well, the council decided at that point that it would take a punt over the next 12 months and hopefully the reactive maintenance would drop. Well, as it's turned out, it hasn't dropped. In fact, it's probably increased. So my question to you then is, although the budget says that, if we don't spend it, we just leave pipes leaking everywhere or sewers overflowing, we cannot do that. So although we try and work within the budgets and we have cut back levels of service, and I'm going to be briefing you in the annual plan discussions over the next month or so on what cuts we have done this year and what we are proposing to even cut further next year for you to consider. But at the end of the day, although the budgets are there and we're trying to work to them, we still have to repair water and wastewater when problems occur.
Councillor McKenzie.
I guess, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to sit around this table and say we're just going to let, you know, the sewers overflow or whatever. But I just feel as though I've never been given the opportunity to understand in more detail about the risks that you identified when we did the LTP, that those risks have materialised, and here is the consequences, and actually possibly here are some other things that you may or may not have been able to do. I'm just being clear that as part of the governance team, I feel as though I'm just left in the situation of, oh, well, so be it. There's nothing that can be done. So there's...
No, look, I think the clear distinction is if our capital budgets exceed in any way, shape or form the budget, we get a report. We have a report for a carryover, an increase in budget, an adjustment between capital projects, a reprioritisation. What you're saying is we don't receive that in the sense of maintenance, and it could appear from the outside or from inside that maintenance budgets are not actually budgets. They are just kind of general indications that, and the money is spent regardless of the budget because it has to be done, as Richard suggested, if a pipe breaks and needs fixing. So I think there is a distinct difference between the approach that we see as governance when it comes to capital items versus maintenance, although maintenance is, as these figures demonstrate, an extremely large number. And if you underestimate it or you under budget or you take a risk, the consequences can run into millions of dollars pretty fast. So I think it is a very good question.
Can I just add to that, that the Operations Committee has been giving us information for the last 6 months. Each time we've been showing that the maintenance, particularly in the water and wastewater, is still trending up and not staying within budget. And the quarterly report in September, we indicated a similar forecast on what was going on. And at the moment, nothing's eased up. The maintenance is still needing to be done.
Councillor McKenzie.
I don't want to get into too much of a debate about it, but as the chair of that committee, all I'm saying is at no point actually in that committee either have we been given options and choices to be made. I would emphatically state that that has never occurred. So just for the record.
So yeah, I think we do, because there is clearly options. For example, there is a capital program that sits over there, which is an amount of money, and there is always the potential, although that is not historically what we have done, to consider, well, if we're running ahead $3 million in maintenance, how is that addressed through an adjustment in another area of council? I think part of the reason is that the operation, well, actually it's part of the reason the operations committee now covers more than just engineering, is that it should provide opportunities or considerations across the board if there is a deficit running somewhere to consider offsetting it somewhere else. Hence, operations is not just a engineering related conversation. And I note that somewhere in the parks and reserves is also part of the overspend. So I think what is, and you're likely to hear this more as I no doubt go through other people's comments, this is presenting itself as a significant challenge, and we need a better way of addressing it than just getting a report that says it is what it is. Right, I've got next on the list, thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. I've got Councillor Greening, then Councillor Maru, Councillor Ellis, and Councillor Mailing.
Thank you. First of all, I have to say, probably to the contrary of Councillor Mackenzie, we had lots of opportunities to look at this in the LTP. I raised a number of questions about the prudence of the spending that was going on and the risks that were coming down track and the risk of escalating maintenance costs and operational costs that we should be saving while we embarked on all these other capital programs which would provide financial risk, and it's playing out as I expected it would. So I do take issue with saying that we didn't have the opportunities. We certainly did, and it's why I voted against the LTP. My question really relates to the debt. So what are we doing to ensure we have the required debt headroom given the high residual risk rating of a disaster event?
That's really, Mr. Mayor. When a council set its limits on rates and debt as part of the LTP process, it's considered the level of headroom it actually needed for disaster events, for example, and it was a deliberate decision of council that rather than, for example, keeping reserves, it's going to rely on debt headroom should an event occur. While council continues to operate within the debt limits and rates limits within the LTP, so we're on budget in that area, for example, particularly around debt, then council has sufficient headroom. And so I'm comfortable that while borrowing more may well be unpalatable because of the additional borrowing costs, we have sufficient headroom should we have an event. Like all councils, we would be extremely challenged if we had a series of events that in turn added up to significant amounts of money. And the headroom we have available in our borrowing program comes to you via the Treasury Report, which is also on the council agenda today.
Thanks, Mike. Councillor Maru.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a follow-on pretty much from Councillor Mackenzie's questioning, but my key question is, I think I've asked it before, who in council, in terms of officers, has the delegated authority to spend $3 million outside of budget? Does that exist?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, there's no direct delegated authority to spend funding outside of the budget. There is some delegation to the Chief Executive to approve funding that's not being provided for. That typically would cover the emergency works that we would need to do.
So in answer to that question, because I thought that was the answer, how do we find ourselves with $3.1 million potentially being overspent at the end of the year without any council approval?
That is a difficult position that we find ourselves in. I think you're likely to see in future more reporting back to council and the request for their additional expenditure to be approved. So, and you'll find from time to time in reports, we'll have, this is unbudgeted expenditure and you'll be asked to approve that unbudgeted expenditure. Or as has been indicated by Mr. Kirby, there'll be in the reporting, for example, to the Operations Committee there will be indications that what are the trade-offs. In many cases, we are caught between a rock and a hard place. As Mr. Kirby has indicated, there are works that are outside of our budget provisions, but we can't not deal with them. Large water leaks, wastewater overflows, those sorts of things. So yes, there is a procedural change that is necessary to ensure that it comes back to council, even if that is to get retrospective approval for expenditure that is outside of the budget. The other thing to remember is the budgets are annual budgets. So while this, at the moment, we're indicating a position at the end of the year where we're going to be over budget, we won't know exactly what that number is until we get there. And so, you may well look like you're over budget in the 30th of September, but it's going to come back into line. So there is some care needed in terms of where we land the plane at the end of the year, which puts additional emphasis on council's financial forecasting. We've just completed a financial forecast as part of the preparation for the annual plan process.
So if I can, Mr. Bell, just got two more quick, well, maybe first not a quick point. So if I just reflect, Mr. Drummond, on that answer, is that council's key purpose is to sign off an annual plan and long-term plan. And we set budget within that, but actually the mechanism to control that is that it may be just that it has to come back to council, we have to approve more money. It seems really coarse in terms of we drive strategy and funding, but actually anyway, we're going to have a report back that comes back to variation, and that's where we are now. I would have thought we'd have a report back well before this, formally around this table, saying we need some variations or some work stuff. So it's probably more than a comment than a question. And the last comment is a 7.3. I think it's a little bit arrogant saying the fact that our defaulting rates are down is a reflection of people not hurting. So I get in terms of council is very good at collecting rates, very good. Because if you don't pay it, then they'll go to the bank and the bank will pay it. But I think it's a little bit arrogant in using that as a benchmark to saying that people have affordability rates.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. And I think on the previous point, what we don't want to end up is having to have a council resolution every time there's a water leak in order to, so there's a balance between, and as Mike said, if it all came back in line by Q3, then because the budget is annual, it wouldn't be an exceedance. So I think somewhere between Councillor Mackenzie's suggestion around the operations committee and how that's reported and what options are provided, but also recognising that there are a whole lot of operational things that go on every day. And if you look at it, then take it away from engineering where it's water leaks and take it to building consents or consenting, where, for example, there's a whole lot of consents coming the door. We don't have the ability to just go, oh, well, the way of managing that is we won't accept the consents. And we ended up with a deficit in a building consent in the previous year because of a change in activity. Well, we can't. So again, it's getting this mix right between the information that comes to us and the options we're provided and our governance role. But coming back to Councillor Greening's point, and he's quite right, he made very strong statements about his concern over the risk of the budget approach we were taking. Ultimately, we all had those conversations and set those budgets and then the rate requirements that sit with them, knowing that there was a risk that, you know, if maintenance was higher than was anticipated, then this was one of the potential situations. So again, it's just constantly trying to improve our processes and ensuring that we get the right information in the most timely fashion, where we are able to make decisions or interventions or prioritizations that can impact it. We should be given the opportunity to, but there are plenty of occasions where we simply won't be able to change it until we get to the next annual plan or 10-year plan budget time. Councillor Kinnemont.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Following on from that, so there's been some comments around the table here about the lack of reporting or how it's been reported or what are the options available. Can staff come back with an options of how it can be better reported? Can they do all these maintenance jobs need to be done now? Can it be deferred? Do we have to have a gold-plated maintenance program where maybe silver or bronze is better?
I'm reasonably confident that we don't have a gold-plated maintenance program. I'm reasonably confident that, and I'm sure Mike and at the next operations committee, I'm sure they're given the conversation, there may be more information provided, that a lot of the reactive maintenance, if we don't do it, we'll be sitting here having a different report, which is explaining why the sewage impacts in the environment and or water leaks, and our non-revenue water has gone through the roof because we haven't got to fix it in a timely fashion. So I think the message has been clearly sent. I'm pretty sure it has been picked up, and then I think we can wait and see how that comes through at the next operations committee meeting.
Can we just have confirmation that will occur at the next operations meeting, please?
Yes, I will endeavour. I'm just trying to interpret the options that Councillor Mackenzie talked about. And initially I interpreted that to mean options in what we do in the field, and those are limited. But I think the options she's talking about is how we fund some of these losses and going forward, and give us some indication, or get councils to give us some indication of how we're going to fund any deficits as a result of what we do.
Yeah, you can have those conversations with Councillor Mackenzie as chair of that committee before the next committee meeting. Right, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thanks for the report. Not, great reading, but I understand where we're at. But could you please help me understand something? Because, we set our budgets and we set them through the annual plan, and interlinked with the budgets are our levels of service. So that's what we say we're going to do over that time. So could you please give me some understanding with this table on page 156, and we're looking at the percentage of full year budget spent. So, and I'm just trying to get some understanding from this, or should I expect to get some understanding from this, about where we're at with our levels of service. If we've spent, 96% of the regulatory services and harbour master budget, have we done close to 96% of the work? I understand that that's seasonally based, but this report only goes to December, and we've already got, January's pretty busy for the harbour. I'm just using this as an example because it's quite a simplistic one for my brain. So is it tracking that our levels of service and what we say we're going to deliver is tracking in line with the percentage of the annual budget that we've actually spent? Where do we see that, and how do we compare that? Because there's two parts to the story.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we're looking at the capital expenditure table there. So your example, regulatory services and harbour master, 96%. So they have an annual program there for some discrete items to vehicles, vessels, etc. In that space. So they've actually done that part of a program for acquiring those new assets. So that is largely complete for them. In relation to the general levels of service, I would probably go back to the statement of comprehensive revenue and expense and look at the percentages there. It's on page 4 of my report. I'm not sure of your pagination. In which case, we do have year-to-date percentages of full year budget there. We can see that our revenues at 43%, our expenses are at 52% overall, or 50% of the way through the year. So there is some information there. And if councillors have any particular detail that they want, we are obviously available to for them to make inquiries of. So as far in terms of levels of service, we can see that maintenance expenses are the big pressure point there, depreciations there, but I think that statement of comprehensive revenue and expense does give some indication there.
Yeah, maybe it's just me. I'm not quite getting that. I mean, I just want to be assured that we are, if we've spent 100% of a budget on something, we've done 100% of what we've done. And if we have, and that we need to do for the rest of the year, that I can be confident that that work program has been done, or is this something we're going to know that we're going to need more money for it later?
Yeah, no, I think, and the key thing is to
Yeah.
just make sure that you're reading the operational lines and the capital ones slightly differently.
Okay.
It's okay. Councillor Mailing and then Councillor Butler.
All right. Well, I'll be happy to move the receipt of the report, and I want to thank Paul for the report and the nearly 40 minutes he spent with me this week explaining a few things with me in relation to this. And look, those of us that have sat around this table for a few years, in the past, sometimes we've had surpluses. So you've collected rates and you haven't spent the money. So it goes both ways. We need to remember that. And nobody wants to see us in this position, but we made some decisions about some things that we will do this year that are going forward in terms of some property and surplus stuff. But if you look in here, you can see actually about nearly 23% of this is actually depreciation that we're funding. You know, it's a significant number. And we are, when I started on this council, we weren't actually funding depreciation. And so that's a significant cost going forward. And we've grown. And I think that was a discussion that Paul and I had, that as a council, when you grow, you do more things. And this week I got complaints about our mowing because I thought we were going to make baleage down at the aquatic centre this week because the grass was that damn long. And on the reserve behind my property. And we got some action. I rang in at about 8:30 and the mower was actually there by 1 o'clock. So that was probably a cost, but Nelmac wasn't doing their job. So, you know, we have to maintain what we've got. If you don't, it goes backwards. We had an NRSBU meeting yesterday and we went and visited the site with the representative. 9 years ago, when we had a resource consent, we were criticised because we said we had sweated the asset too much. We have had a visit from the same commissioner over another resource consent for biosolids, and she was complimentary about the improvement of that asset. And that asset to replace is about $400 million. So when you've got more assets, it costs you more to maintain. If you don't spend the money, they fall to bits. It's going to be a very difficult year going forward. We either put the rates up or we do less, or we take more time to get to where we want to be for depreciation. But I wasn't happy when I read this report, but I've had it explained to me. Our job as governance is to see this and to notice it and think what's going to go forward, because it's going to be tough times. And I see it right around the country. Every council that I've seen is facing tough times. We're actually talking about amalgamation in Wellington City, or councils that don't get on. You know, so that's a bit unheard of in some ways. So I'm happy that we've got this report. I'm not happy about the content, but I understand where we're coming from. And the annual plan will be very, very difficult. That's why I'm happy to move. We'll see.
Thank you, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm happy to second the report. And I think that it's a question of interpreting numbers. You know, it's relating the numbers to the real world, joining the dots, so that when we get the reports to the operations committee, we actually are understanding that we're spending some of this budget that we've allocated. So that's my concern. I think it's about better communication. So happy to move.
So it's been moved and seconded. Councillor McKenzie.
Oh, thank you. I just one thing that would assist me, I think, would be just to understand the forecast numbers for both operating and capital. If you could just explain to me what is the methodology that's been used to derive the forecast numbers.
Through Mr. Mayor. So we commenced a reforecast as part of the annual plan process in December. So November, December, we do that work. The managers were well aware of the financial constraints that council was under. So, you know, there was quite a lot of conversation about you need to do everything you possibly can to pull your forecast expenditure down to try and keep the council as a whole within the fiscal envelope we set for the first year of the LTP. And I believe that managers, budget holders did a significantly difficult piece of work around that. Otherwise, we'd be looking at a forecast with a much bigger deficit for the end of the year. So that forecast does two things. One, it allows us to have a conversation with you, probably at the March Council meeting, about any expenditure that's going to need additional authorisation. But two, it's really important that when we arrive at the annual plan, we have a very good indication of where this council is going to end this financial year. So, you know, we're looking like having an additional $6.5 million deficit at the end of this year. We have to build that into the annual plan because essentially we borrow the money and we have to fund it for the next 12 months. So in short, councillor, the reforecast we do halfway through the year allows us to gain the insights into the end of the year position. However, the monthly reporting that we do to the executive team allows managers to monitor budgets and take corrective action, notwithstanding that we have the challenges when we have very tight budgets and we don't control infrastructure failure.
If I could, sorry, that didn't quite answer my question. To be more specific, is the methodology that's been used to derive the year-end forecast for both capital and operating, does it take expenditure to 31st of December plus best known guess at what has to be spent from 1st of January through to 30th of June? Or does it take actual expenditure to the end of December plus what I've got in my budget through to the end of June?
Thank you. I can clarify. It actually takes the actual expenditure to December and it takes the expected. So you just don't add the budget for the next 6 months. You actually go through line by line and say what's realistic. And in the case if you've got an over budget situation, what can I pull back? What can I cut back on? Aim being to be the forecast to the best of our ability, bring us in on budget at the end of the year with trade-offs between different areas of council as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it's been moved and seconded, and I think that what this highlights is there's the perfect budget where you get absolutely everything exactly as you anticipate, and you end up with it being exactly what you thought. Never happens. Historically, our budgets have probably been slightly more generous, for want of a better term, and we get to the end and you end up in a surplus. Now, you've collected money off people, but you get to the end of the year and everyone goes, "Oh, that's nice." We consciously chose, and as Councillor Greening has pointed out, with some degree of opposition / concern, to run a far tighter / riskier budget. That was a conscious decision that we made. So to not collect money off the ratepayer unless it was absolutely necessary. And that leads you to the situation where you are going to find from time to time that one is not better than the other. At the end of the day, you still end up spending the same amount of money, most likely. In fact, you could argue that running a budget the way we're running it now is you end up spending less because the pressure is on constantly to try and meet a tight target, as opposed to having a degree of wiggle room that, you know, which doesn't necessarily keep the focus. So, like, you don't get as good news stories every time you get a quarterly report as you do if you run a very comfortable budget. But in actual fact, it is probably, it's far more like most businesses and most households where they don't have a budget that has a great deal of slack in it. You're constantly having to manage going over things and what you do about it, and then manage it retrospectively. So not perfect, not ideal, but it was a conscious choice that we made. And now we just have to work through it leading up to the annual plan, where we'll have another round of strategic governance decisions to make over what we do for the following financial year. So with that, I'll put the resolution. I thank both Paul and Mike for the report and for answering the questions. So all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. So at this stage, we are going to break for lunch. Then we're going to come back and we are going to go into committee and deal with the in-committee part of the agenda. And then we will come out of committee and finalise the Treasury Report. Apologies, James, you'll have to come back later. Unless Mike's going to handle it for you, because he'll already be here, and the Chief Executive's and Mayor's update. Mike, I'll hand over to you.
Through Mr. Mayor, look, apologies from James Bagnall. He's had to deal with children, so he's unable to present his report this afternoon. I'll take the report as read, but there's a couple of matters I will just bring to your attention. Good news matters. Look, our cash position is much better than what it's been in the previous 2 years around this period. The main driver for that is we haven't had additional drawdowns from our bank facilities over summer, primarily due to less demand for unplanned or unbudgeted CapEx work. So that's a bit of a positive. So we've got reasonable cash balances. We've also got in place now $35 million more in forward starting swap rates. So what that does is we have locked in interest rates from October last year, so lower interest rates looking out. So we've actually reduced our risk and exposure to upward interest rate movements, locked the numbers in. So we're in a better position in terms of the level of our debt that will be fixed moving forward versus subject to market movements. Other than that, I will take the report as read, and I'm quite happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mike. It's open for questions and or moving its receipt. Move Councillor McKenzie. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dakey. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Mike. And so that leaves us the CEO's report and the Mayor's report. I think CEO's report is first. Steve, as acting CEO, I'll come over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will take the report as read. I note that there's me and the Mayor between us and extending the meeting. There was a couple of things I was going to highlight in the report. I won't. I'll see if there's any questions to those. The main thing that I wanted to get across in public session is my thanks for my ELT colleagues, and more particularly Joanna for stepping in as Chief Operating Officer as I've been acting for Janine. And also for Leone. There you go. I've skipped one already. It's late in the day. Particular thanks to Tim King and also to Leone and Robin for helping me out. We're expecting Leone back in due course. It's been a privilege to sit in the seat for her, and I've been happy to do it. Any questions?
Thank you. If not, someone move. Oh, sorry, Councillor Murray. Oh, and Councillor Greening.
Thank you, Mr. I'm happy to move, but just I've got three things. One, I just want to acknowledge the Lagoima work that's now on the website. I think that's a fast step forward, and I spent quite a long time looking at those Lagoimas that are now published. So thank you for actually getting there. I guess just as a matter of a statement, I see Lee's gone, is I have just asked some questions around withholding under Section 6C in terms of body cam footage, but I understand that's totally operational. I'm not going to go into any details, but I just question if we could just look at that, and I've asked that. Torrent Bay was a bumpy ride down, but there was two other items that was discussed in terms of, I guess, concerns or questions. One was appreciation of the harbour master being there, and the fireworks input was awesome. There was some nervousness that they might be facing some significant fees going forwards, but I believe it's been answered with it's a community event and that's not going to happen. So thank you for that. And Mr. Kirby, I'm not sure if you'll follow up in terms of their rates for their committee that were collected previously have paused, and so that was two items that they'd sort of raised. It's not in here, but they were very appreciative to have us there. And I'm not really a boatie, so the boat trip home was much better.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Greening.
Yeah, three items. 4.2, Lagoima, 270 requests from 10 people. raises red flags for me in terms of whether we're providing adequate responses or whether people are coming back dissatisfied and asking the same questions again. So I'm just wondering how we're reacting to that particular statistic. 4.10, this is to do with Motueka Aerodrome. What steps are we taking to ensure compliance? Because it's not clear in the report, and I'd be certainly interested in knowing what those steps are, and that's quite important. Also, just noting also, I hope those steps in some way are addressing the 35-year leases. That's a concern. So how are we addressing that as well? And then in terms of the FTE count at 11.1, in the past we've had a table that broke it down on departments, which I think was useful. So can I ask that we get that breakdown in a table format going forward? Ideally, a 10-year rolling view would be nice because that gives us a firm view of trend, which is really what we're all about.
Okay, thank you through, Mr. Mayor. I'll take those individually, and I know that Joanna would like to speak to that last question. But if I go first and foremost to the 4.2 and the number of Lagoimas from requesters, it's perhaps not so much as you characterise it that there are a small number of individuals who are not satisfied with the responses they get, although many of the people who do request information under Lagoima are not satisfied with the response they get. In this instance, what we're finding is that a number of submitters are looking to reduce the likelihood that they might be charged for a Lagoima under the grounds that entitle us to charge for it by breaking their Lagoima into a number of parts. And so that leads to multiple requests from particular individuals around very closely related subjects. And there is an element of a number of individuals who seek to ask us through the Lagoima process a number of questions as part of building a case for their particular issues to support their particular issues. So that would be my response in respect of that. Your other question, apologies, Councillor Greening, was
Motueka Aerodrome.
Motueka Aerodrome, right. Yeah.
4.10.
4.10. If I go to 4.10, when you talk about the steps that are being taken, the steps that are being taken are relevant to the particular issues that have been identified in the report. So working within council to look at the resource consent status for the dump station, we're engaged with Richard and his team about what's going on in that particular space. Likewise, the hangar that's requiring a resource consent, we're working through that. And yes, we are discussing the leases on the aerodrome. The reason why I'm not being more specific is that because in all of those cases, doing so might influence the opportunity that we've got to get the right kind of outcome. But once we have reached a compliant state with those situations, the information will be made public and the current redactions which are in the report will be removed. If I move to people management and
Joanna.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Joanna to speak. She raised the finger before. She's looking forward to it.
Through the chair, thank you. Just in relation to our FTEs, Councillor Greening, we give a very detailed, comprehensive table on an annual basis. So that's for the June year end, which is then reported in the first available full council. That also provides a 10-year view of our turnover. We haven't necessarily provided 10-year growth or as in a quarterly basis, that more granular view of the FTE by group. But if that is a consensus that would be of value in the CE's report, then we can look to add that.
Yeah,
is there a sorry, Councillor Greening, is there if the information is available and it's in a format that can be done quarterly without it, then that seems to be a reasonable thing to put in.
I agree. It wouldn't be too much administrative task to create that quarterly.
Okay, thank you. So are you happy with that, Councillor Greening?
Yeah, just in terms of the 10-year rolling, it's 10 years past, you're looking for a trend. And if you've got some forecast, I imagine the forecast won't be any more accurate than 3 years. So I wouldn't expect it to be longer than that, which would probably manage to the LTP. So I'm really looking to see a historical trend because that then informs future discussions on where we go.
Okay, yep, that's taken on board. Thank you.
I just to add to that, a 10-year historical trend is certainly going to be upwards in quite some measure if we look at the development of our region and the amount of activity that council has been undertaking over a 10-year period. So I don't think that there would be any surprises in the slope of that curve, but we're happy to do so. I prefer if we do it on a quarterly basis. If that's acceptable, that's fine.
Yep, no, I think that's what we'll aim for, quarterly, effectively replicating what we currently get annually. Okay. Councillor Murray.
Sorry, Mr. White. So in terms of the presentation that was made today to council, and it's item 5 in the CEO's report, what's the next step to give that support from council to test that in terms of supporting the project over in Golden Bay? Because it's, where does that go back to so that we can give some indication earlier?
At the moment, the only contribution we're making of substance is Leith. So we have contributed, I suppose, Leith's time as a legal expert to help with that process and to help the committee work through the subjects that they've got to deal with. Other than that, we're sympathetic to requests that might be made to council to help them out, particularly with in-kind support rather than direct financial assistance.
I think the key thing that came out of today's presentation, and we can leave it with you to bring back your report, is just the support or otherwise in principle for the use of the land. Everything else around is a down the track conversation. But as I think they pointed out, if they're going to remain focused on a solution that is based in Golden Bay or Antarctica, they probably need an indication from us, yay or nay. While we're on the topic of Golden Bay, the other conversation in the public forum this morning was about the rock wall and packer wall. My takeout from that was that they would like a report to come to council, albeit knowing that they do not support or are not willing to fund to provide the bond for the council to determine whether or not what they are proposing is or isn't acceptable. And again, I think they're probably entitled to request that it's put in front of us and we get to determine one way or the other. Having debated the policy that included the bond, one could assume what the outcome might be, but then one also might not want to assume too much. Yeah. So those two things do need to be brought back to us in one shape or form relatively quickly. Yep, I've got Mark. Anything further, Glenn?
I was just going to ask a comment around the pack war and the bond there, just a bit of clarity that the Mark, the residents' understanding of the staff mentioned to him about the removal of the wall and such sounded a bit incorrect from my understanding of the policy. So some sort of clarity, understanding for us that he has got the correct gist and that the correct information from the policy has been relayed, because I feel the policy allowed quite a bit of
it did.
And so I want to make sure that the information that he received matches the intention of the policy. That would be something that I'd be interested in too.
Yeah, well, I think that report will need to cover that, but until it comes back to us to make it, yes, it does need to be clear that they are the intent of the policy. I think when it was finally approved, in my recollection, was the council, and certainly a number of councillors spoke about, particularly in these circumstances, given the time and the overlap between not having a policy and having a policy, that the council was probably slightly more open to considering the scale of the bond and what it might cover. Now, whether that conversation has then followed through into the discussions between what I suspect are legal people remains to be seen. But ultimately, I think they're entitled to ask it to be brought to us, even if that recommendation that comes with it is a no, for us to consider how we think the policy has been implemented in this instance. So,
also just to clarify, we're not going to. He gave the impression, he may have received the impression that we would remove the wall at will. You know, that's the sort of message that was being relayed, which is clearly not the point. It would only be if it became dangerous to the public, or it fell over, or it was never an intention that we could rock up and remove someone's wall because it looked a bit funny or we didn't like the look of it. That's not what the policy said. So clarity around that, particular for him, if that's not the case, would be great.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ellis, then Councillor Greening.
I'm just curious if there's any information about whether or not the current rock walls are having a bigger impact on those properties without rock walls. And is there any information on that? Because generally that was kind of the whole point of that policy coming in, was the downstream effects of rock walls going in and the effects on other properties. So are we sure that the rock walls aren't contributing to the further erosion of those other properties?
I think it's very clear to understand. My understanding of the current situation is complying with consent conditions, with design, all of those things that take, there's not a debate about that. In fact, the list of offered conditions, I think Mr. Morris said, is quite extensive in order to address those. The sticking point is the bond. And we had quite a debate about the bond, and there was a range of opinions. The majority opinion prevailed, and there is a bond. We just now need to understand whether, and get a report back which says this is the situation. We'll work with the Residents Association. They're prepared to do A, B, C, D, E, and F, which all complies to the policy. There's a sticking point about the bond. Now it's a decision for the council to make whether to accept that or not. Okay, Richard.
Can I just comment on that? There is a misunderstanding amongst staff on the intentions of that bond, and we've had debates in house. So I think we need to bring that back and get some clarity around what that bond covers, because I've had a view on it, but I've been pushed back by other members of staff on that respect as well. So what's practical and what's appropriate is completely different to what the policy indicates.
I suspect I know where that disagreement may be coming from. And hence the reason I wasn't a big supporter of the thing, because I wasn't sure that anyone was clear what it actually was going to be implemented by. The only way to really resolve that is actually not to keep going round and round circles, is to bring it here, to bring the residents' offer or whatever they've said, to bring the council staff's advice, whatever that is, and for us to determine what we want to do. And that will then then clarify precisely what we intended.
What intended. Yep.
Because you'll then have a decision.
Great.
Sorry, Councillor Greening. Back to you.
Thanks. Just first of all, thanks for Councillor Dyke raising that point. It was a point I was just going to jump into, but I will add my 2 cents worth, knowing that it's coming back anyway. My understanding of our discussion around that was the bond was to address liability risk, mitigate risk for council. It had nothing to do with any structures. It was if someone suffered damage and would come to us looking to sue us from putting in place the rock wall or allowing it. So I must admit I was rather surprised by what they were saying, and it was quite an extensive discussion around that whole issue, whether you convent the property or actually provide them the bond to mitigate the risk. But I'll leave that there. I'm sure there'll be recordings and minutes. Certainly I went back over my notes, and that's how I understood the discussion progressed. My other point really was just on coming back to the FTE count. I was just trying to, and I forgot to mention it, the mention of the vacancies that were coming up, and I was trying to get my head around what you were saying there. So you've got 12 vacancies. Are you replacing 10, and are you adding a two new ones, taking the FTE count back up to, I think, 410? Or are these just new roles and the FTE count is not going up to 410, it's staying at 408? I was a bit confused by that message.
Joanna.
Through the chair, so our head count in terms of from an HR perspective includes existing vacancies that we're recruiting for at the moment, so that's 10, but it doesn't, we don't count new positions until the person actually starts physically in the role. So you can assume that when those 2 new positions have been recruited for, the head count will move by 2.
So it will go up to 410 again?
Correct.
Right, so we haven't reduced anything. So are these new roles? Because I thought the staff were trying to sinking lid this and manage the FTE count, not start adding more and more FTEs. That's all. That was certainly a discussion I got out of the LTP discussion when I was pushing the issue.
The roles that we've got are the ones that we've established through the LTP process. Sinking lid is your characterisation of it. We are certainly putting in a significant amount of rigour on any new roles that we fill, and we're not necessarily filling all of the roles that we thought we might want to fill when we set the LTP. Joanna wishes to add something.
And through the chair, so some of these roles are roles that were deferred. They were in this year's financial budgets, but the executive leadership team took a decision to defer the recruitment of some of them. So we've been working to create some salary cost savings by not filling the role from July. And this is just some of that subsidiary decisions coming through now in this financial year.
Okay, well, yeah, so I can see what you're doing now, but that's not what I thought we were doing. I thought we were trying to manage the FT count, and if we needed new roles, some would leave. They create the vacancies, and then those new roles come into those vacancies. We're not just filling vacancies and then adding to them, which sounds like this is what we're doing. So I have a little concern about that, and I'm sure this will come up in the annual plan discussion.
So that was going to be my point. Yes, we will no doubt have this conversation again in the very near future in relation to the annual plan conversation.
You may recall a conversation that Leonie had with council, which was that she is not going to cut our arm off. So if there are roles which we need to complete the activity that we've got to do, and a case in point is that we've recently brought control services in-house for a couple of different reasons. So it would have been nonsensical to have taken on responsibility for the control services without the people to manage that work. So where it's necessary for us to have roles to complete our function and complete our commitments to the community, we will. We're looking very, very closely at all of the ones that we bring on board.
Okay, thank you. I think that draws us to the conclusion. Someone move the receipt. Oh, yeah, yes, well, I'm just, yeah. So the conclusion of that item, I know it's late and we're all desperate to leave. Our seconder, Councillor Mackenzie, or Maru Mackenzie again, and Mackenzie Maru Mackenzie and partners. All in favour, please say aye. All against, carried. Last item between us and leaving, which is me.
Amazing.
Yeah, brilliant. I spent hours slaving over it. So I'll take it as read. Probably the only thing I want to comment on is on Steve, myself and Paula attended Leonie's husband's funeral on Monday. And I just acknowledge the fact that I know Leonie hasn't been physically at work for the last little period, and but she has continued to be involved in the business, supporting Steve, providing that feedback, and they've been through a particularly challenging time, as I'm sure we're all aware. So I really want to acknowledge both the impact on her and her family, but also the commitment that she's made to the organisation to continue her involvement where she has been able to over the course of really the last 6 months. And I'd also like to acknowledge those who have stepped into those positions, Steve, Joanna, but also the wider executive leadership team who have continued to operate in what is a very challenging environment anyway, without Leonie's presence. So that's really what I want to comment on in terms of my report. Other than that, I'll take it as read, and if there are any questions, I'll answer them. Otherwise, I will move its receipt.
I'm happy to see them. Excellent. Just your comments.
I'll put the resolution. All those in favour?
I'd especially like to congratulate you on a witty but to the point speech at the opening of the Waimea Community Dam. Yeah, wow, I think you should be circulating it on email for those of you who weren't there. It was something to, I don't know.
The Waimea Weekly had a pretty good summary of it.
Right, anyway, well done. For those of you who weren't there, we talked about what else could we have built the dam with, and then started to suggest that it could be legal opinions because they are watertight and various policies and plans. And anyway, it was well done.
Thank you. I think the message got through, certainly central government, when I highlighted the issue of pipe size to extract the water. And when we first designed the pipe, it was the government funding pipe size, and that was woefully inadequate to get the water out of it. So we subsequently went with government funding. So design version B was government funding plus government loans or government grants plus it, still inadequate. And it was only when the pipe size was designed to incorporate the contribution of landowners and ratepayers that the pipe size was actually adequate for the purpose necessary. So despite the fact it was done in good humour, I'm pretty sure the point landed. So anyway, thank you very much, Councillor McKenzie. Right. Oh yes, that is the other thing I should touch on in terms of the attendance and obviously we were very fortunate not to have any natural disasters or things that directly impacted council over the Christmas New Year break, but clearly the community had the very significant impact of the unfortunate death of Lynn Fleming, Senior Sergeant Lynn Fleming, and there was an outpouring of community support for the police in general and Lynn Fleming and her family specifically. And Robin and other associated staff did a great job of organising, and particularly thanks to the library staff who kind of administered that, was the condolence book signing, which started as across our region and ended up being picked up by both Buller and West Coast as well. And so all those messages and signatures have been collated and then passed on through to Lynn Fleming's family. So
2 copies were made, one for the police fraternity and one for them.
So again, thank you to everyone who's involved in putting that together. Right, I'll put the resolution. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. That draws us to the conclusion of the meeting. Hopefully, not all our council meetings for the balance of the council term extend to 4:45, but we did start slightly late, so I'll closing Carrick here. My bad.
Keep going, keep going. Don't worry about it.
Well, no, I will do it anyway because I should. Particularly seeing as I'm sitting in front of this here. Kua mutu a mātou mahi mō tēnei wā, manakitia mātou o mātou ho o mātou whānau katoa, au ki te aorangi, e tau mai ana.